The lake always smelled sweeter in late summer, like warm water and cut grass, the kind of scent that made people linger a little longer before going inside. Theo's 12th birthday was supposed to be one of those perfect evenings, the kind you remember years later and smile about. String lights glowed along the deck, music drifted softly from the speakers, and laughter filled every corner of the house. I had planned it for weeks, juggling restaurant shifts and school schedules, making sure everything was just right. My name is Rachel Monroe, and for 40 years, I believed that if you worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, and stayed loyal to family, things would eventually balance out. That belief cracked the moment my son stepped into the dining room. Theo walked toward the table slowly, his shoulders slightly hunched, eyes lowered. At first, I thought he was just overwhelmed by the attention. Then he lifted his face into the warm glow of the candles, and my chest tightened. A bruise, dark and unmistakable, bloomed beneath his right eye. It wasn't fresh enough to be from a fall that afternoon, and it wasn't light enough to be ignored. The room kept laughing. Glasses clinked. Someone joked about cake. But all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. I crossed the room before I even realized I'd moved. "Theo," I said quietly, cupping his face. "What happened?" He flinched, just barely, but enough for me to notice. Across the table, my nephew leaned back in his chair, long legs stretched out, a lazy grin on his face. He was 15, taller than Theo, broader, and far too comfortable for someone sitting in a room where my child was hurt. "I just showed him how things work," he said with a shrug. "Grandma and Grandpa always say I'm right anyway." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the adults. My parents chuckled like it was harmless teasing. Someone muttered, "Boys will be boys." My sister sat stiffly beside her son, fingers tight around her wine glass, eyes fixed on the table. She didn't laugh. She didn't defend. She didn't look at me at all. I turned back to Theo, my voice sharper now. "Who did this to you?" He hesitated. His eyes flicked toward my sister for a split second, then dropped to the floor. Then he said something that froze the entire room. "Why did you let him?" The words landed heavy and final. My sister's glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the floor. Wine splashed across the tiles like spilled blood. No one moved. No one breathed. Every conversation died in its throat. She stared at Theo like he had spoken a language she didn't understand, her face draining of color, lips parting as if to speak, but no sound came out. A chill crawled up my spine, and it had nothing to do with the lake breeze drifting in through the open doors. I didn't know what my sister had allowed. I didn't know when it had happened. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. That bruise wasn't an accident. And whatever had been happening behind my back was about to come into the light. A week earlier, I had overheard something that should have warned me. I had stepped outside late one evening to clear my head after closing the restaurant. Monroe's Dockside Grill was my life's work, something I had built slowly, brick by brick, for Theo's future. The dock creaked softly beneath my shoes as the water lapped against the posts. I hadn't realized anyone else was nearby until I heard my sister's voice, sharp and low, cutting through the quiet. "Dad's handing everything to Theo," she said. "Maybe it's time he learns what responsibility actually feels like." I stopped cold, hidden in the shadows near the boat shed. Her tone wasn't joking. It wasn't casual. It was bitter. She paced as she spoke, phone pressed to her ear. "If he's the favorite, someone needs to remind him where he stands." The man on the other end of the line, her husband, murmured something I couldn't hear. Her voice softened slightly, but the edge remained. "We need to get ahead of this. Control it before it's too late." Control what? The restaurant. Theo's future. My choices. I had told myself I was imagining things, that stress was coloring my thoughts. Family was complicated, but they wouldn't hurt a child. They wouldn't cross that line. Standing in the dining room on my son's birthday, staring at that bruise, I realized how wrong I had been. And as the guests shifted uncomfortably, my parents insisting it was nothing, my sister silent and shaking, I felt something harden inside me. This wasn't just about a birthday. It was about trust. And it was already broken. The room never really recovered after that. Even when someone swept up the broken glass and the music came back on, the warmth had drained away. Conversations restarted in pieces, forced and uneven, like everyone was pretending not to feel the shift that had settled over the house. I watched Theo sit back down at the table, his shoulders tight, his hands folded carefully in his lap like he was trying not to take up space. That hurt more than the bruise. My parents moved in immediately, the way they always did when things got uncomfortable. My mother laughed a little too loudly and said, "Let's not make this a big deal. Kids' roughhouse. We don't need to ruin a birthday over something so small." My father nodded along, already cutting another slice of cake as if sugar could smooth everything over. Across the table, my sister finally looked up. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He probably tripped," she said. "Theo's always been a little clumsy." I stared at her, searching for the sister I thought I knew. The one I grew up with, who used to sneak out to the dock with me late at night and whisper secrets about boys and dreams. That sister was gone. The woman sitting in front of me was guarded, calculating, and far too comfortable dismissing my son's pain. I leaned down toward Theo, lowering my voice. "Did you fall?" He shook his head, barely noticeable. His eyes flicked again toward my sister, then back to the tablecloth. The message was clear. He was afraid to say more. I straightened slowly. "We'll talk later," I said to him, brushing his hair back gently. "Okay?" He nodded, relief flashing briefly across his face. The party stumbled forward after that. Presents were opened, candles blown out, photos taken that would later feel hollow when I looked at them. Guests left earlier than planned, their goodbyes awkward, their smiles tight. I noticed the way a few neighbors avoided my sister's gaze, how one of my servers from the restaurant lingered just long enough to give me a concerned look before slipping out the door. They had felt it too. Whatever was happening in my family wasn't invisible anymore. Once the house finally emptied, the quiet pressed in hard. The lake reflected the porch lights in long, trembling streaks. Theo retreated to his room without being asked. I watched him go, my chest aching, then turned toward my sister. "Megan," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We need to talk." She sighed dramatically and sank onto the couch, crossing her legs. "Rachel, not tonight. You're emotional, and this isn't the time." "This is exactly the time." She rolled her eyes, glancing toward our parents, who hovered nearby like referees waiting to step in. "I don't know what you think you saw," she said, "but you're reading into things." Before I could respond, my friend Laura, who had stayed behind to help clean up, hesitated in the doorway. She clutched a stack of plates, her face pale. "Rachel," she said quietly. "I didn't want to say anything earlier, but, last week, I heard something." The room stilled. "What kind of something?" I asked. She swallowed. "I was outside by the dock. I heard Theo crying. I thought I heard your nephew's voice too. When I looked, no one was there anymore." My heart dropped into my stomach. Megan shot to her feet. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "You must be mistaken." Laura's hand shook slightly, but she held her ground. "I know what I heard." I turned back to my sister. "Explain." Her jaw tightened. "Kids fight. Your son probably mouthed off." "My kid isn't violent." My father stepped forward then, his voice firm. "That's enough. We're not turning this into a spectacle. Think about the family. Think about the restaurant." There it was. Reputation first. Always. "This isn't about the restaurant," I said, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. "This is about my son being hurt." My mother folded her arms. "You're overreacting. You've always been too sensitive." Something inside me snapped quietly, cleanly. Years of swallowing comments like that, of letting my sister's ambition overshadow my work, of accepting my parents' favoritism for the sake of peace, all of it surged up at once. No, I said. I'm done pretending this is normal. Megan laughed sharply, but I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. What are you going to do, Rachel? Call the police over a playground scuffle? I didn't answer her. I turned and walked toward the study instead. Behind me, I heard my mother call my name, panic creeping into her voice. My father muttered something about trust. Megan scoffed. I closed the door and opened my laptop. The security cameras. I had installed them last year after a break-in scare at the restaurant and extended the system to the house and dock. At the time, it felt excessive. Now, it felt like instinct. My fingers trembled as I logged in and scrolled back through the footage, my breath shallow. I pulled up the night Laura mentioned. The screen flickered. Theo appeared near the dock, small and alone, his hands shoved into his pockets. Then my nephew stepped into frame. He said something I couldn't hear, shoved Theo hard, and sent him crashing to the ground. My breath caught. Then Megan appeared. She stood there, arms crossed, watching. She didn't intervene. She didn't shout. She didn't move. Theo curled in on himself, shielding his face. I paused the video, my vision blurring with tears. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't kids being kids. This was something far worse. I heard footsteps behind me. The door creaked open. Theo stood there, eyes wide, the bruise under his eye darker in the soft lamplight. Mom, he whispered. I knelt in front of him and pulled him into my arms. I know, I said softly. You don't have to be scared anymore. He hesitated, then spoke into my shoulder. She told him I deserved it. My sister's betrayal settled fully into place. And I knew, without any doubt, that nothing in our family would ever be the same again. I walked back into the living room with my phone in my hand and my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. They were all still there. My parents by the kitchen island, whispering urgently to each other. Megan pacing near the window, arms folded tight across her chest. She stopped when she saw my face. She knew. Whatever she saw in my eyes told her the truth had caught up. I checked the cameras, I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. I saw everything. The room seemed to tilt. Megan opened her mouth, then closed it again. My mother inhaled sharply. My father's shoulders stiffened like he was bracing for impact. You stood there, I continued, taking a step forward. You watched your son push mine to the ground. You didn't stop it. You didn't help him. You didn't even look concerned. That's not what happened, Megan snapped, but her words came too fast, too desperate. You're twisting it. Tucker was just playing around. Theo fell. He curled up on the ground, I said, my voice cutting through hers. He was scared. And you did nothing. My father raised a hand. Rachel, let's slow down. You're emotional. I laughed then, a short, humorless sound. No, I said. I've never been clearer. My mother stepped closer, her voice dropping into that familiar pleading tone. Think about what you're doing. If this gets out, it could ruin everything. The restaurant. Our name. I turned to her slowly. You're worried about gossip, I said. I'm worried about my child. Megan finally lost her composure. He's not fragile, she shot back. You've raised him to be soft. Tucker was trying to toughen him up. Someone has to. The words hit me harder than the video ever could. Toughen him up, I repeated quietly. Theo flinched behind me. I felt something snap cleanly inside my chest. Get out, I said. Megan stared at me. What? Get out of my house, I said louder now. You and your family. Now. My parents gasped in unison. You don't mean that, my mother said, shaking her head. Rachel, stop. This is still family. No, I said. Family doesn't hurt children and call it discipline. Megan's face hardened. You can't do this, she said. You don't get to erase us because of one moment. One moment? I said, stepping closer. You planned this. I heard you by the dock. You were angry about Theo. About his future. About the restaurant. You let your resentment turn into cruelty. Her eyes flicked away. That was answer enough. Tucker appeared then, lingering near the doorway, eyes wide, suddenly unsure of himself. For the first time, he looked like a kid who realized he'd gone too far. Mom, he muttered. Megan spun toward him. Go wait in the car. He hesitated, then did as he was told. I turned back to my parents. You've excused her behavior her whole life, I said. But this ends now. I won't let Theo grow up thinking this is normal. My father looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. You're overreacting, he said quietly. This could have been handled privately. Privately, I echoed. So nothing changes. Megan grabbed her purse, her movements sharp. You'll regret this, she said. You think you can just cut us off? You think I'll let you take everything? I'm not taking anything, I said. I'm protecting my son. She scoffed, but her voice wavered. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I said. But it's mine to make. She stormed out, heels striking the floor with each step, the front door slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. A moment later, I heard the car engine roar to life and fade down the driveway. Silence followed. My parents stood there, stunned, like they were waiting for me to apologize. I didn't. I'm calling someone in the morning, I said calmly. I'm reporting this. My mother's face crumpled. Rachel, please. Don't do this. Think about what people will say. I met her eyes. I don't care what they say. I care about what my son feels safe saying. My father turned away, shaking his head. You've gone too far. No, I said softly. I finally went far enough. They left soon after, without hugs, without goodbye kisses for Theo. The house felt emptier, but lighter too, like something toxic had been cut away. Later that night, I sat on Theo's bed while he traced patterns into the blanket with his finger. Am I in trouble? He asked quietly. My heart broke all over again. No, I said, pulling him close. You did nothing wrong. None of this is your fault. He nodded, then hesitated. You're not mad at me? I kissed his hair. Never. Outside, the lake was still, reflecting the moon in long silver lines. I knew what I'd set in motion would change everything. There would be backlash. Legal threats. Family pressure. I would have to fight in ways I never wanted to. But as Theo drifted to sleep against my shoulder, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would do it all again. The house felt different the next morning, quieter in a way that wasn't empty, but settled. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm has torn through and taken what needed to go with it. I stood at the kitchen window watching the lake, replaying everything in my head, Megan's words, my parents' silence, Theo's small voice asking if he was in trouble. Sleep had barely touched me, but clarity had. I made the call before I could second-guess myself. Reporting what happened felt surreal. Saying it out loud stripped away any lingering doubt. Dates, footage, names. The calm voice on the other end thanked me and explained next steps. When I hung up, my hands shook, not from fear, but from the finality of it. There was no going back to pretending. Theo padded into the kitchen not long after, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The bruise was still there, but something in his posture had changed. He stood straighter, less guarded. Are we still going to the restaurant today? He asked. I smiled softly. Yeah. If you want to. I do, he said without hesitation. Monroe's Dockside Grill had always been more than a business to me. I built it when Theo was still small, pouring everything I had into it. Long nights, early mornings, missed weekends. I told myself it was for our future, and it was, but it had also been my refuge when the rest of my family felt complicated. Walking in that morning, the familiar smells of bread and coffee grounded me. Laura was already there, tying on an apron. She looked up when she saw us and read my face immediately. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "I will be." Theo lingered near the counter, watching the staff move with practiced ease. One of the servers waved at him, and he smiled back, a small but genuine smile. I pulled Laura aside and told her everything. The footage. The confrontation. The report. She listened without interrupting, her jaw tightening with each detail. "You did the right thing," she said firmly when I finished. "Anyone who says otherwise is wrong." That support mattered more than I expected. The fallout didn't take long. By midday, my phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls from my parents. Texts that ranged from pleading to accusatory. Megan's husband left a voicemail threatening legal action if I didn't retract my report. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I called my lawyer. By the end of the day, it was clear that Megan and her husband were scrambling. They wanted to control the narrative, to make it seem like a misunderstanding, a family dispute blown out of proportion. But the footage didn't lie, and neither did Theo's account. My parents showed up that evening, unannounced. They stood in my living room like guests instead of family, stiff and uncomfortable. "You've put us in an impossible position," my father said, voice low. "No," I replied. "You put yourselves there when you chose silence." My mother's eyes were red. "We were trying to keep the family together." "At Theo's expense?" I asked. She didn't answer. They talked about consequences. About how people would talk. About how Megan was struggling, how Tucker was just a boy. Not once did they ask how Theo was doing. That told me everything I needed to know. "I need space," I said finally. "From all of this." My father frowned. "You're cutting us off now too?" "I'm protecting my son," I said. "If that feels like being cut off, that's on you." They left without another word. The investigation moved quietly but steadily. I wasn't given details, but I knew enough to understand it was serious. Megan stopped contacting me altogether. Her husband tried once more through his lawyer, but it went nowhere. Weeks passed. Theo changed in small but important ways. He laughed more. He slept better. He stopped flinching when his phone buzzed or when a car pulled into the driveway. One night, while we sat by the lake, he skipped a stone farther than he ever had before and grinned like he'd won a prize. "I think I'm getting better at this," he said. I smiled. "You are." One afternoon, while we were closing up the restaurant, he asked, "Mom, why did Aunt Megan hate me?" The question broke my heart, but I didn't avoid it. "She didn't hate you," I said carefully. "She was angry about things that weren't your fault. Sometimes people take their frustrations out on the wrong person." He thought about that. "That's not fair." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." "But you didn't let it happen again," he said quietly. I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. "I never will." That promise felt heavier than any vow I'd ever made, and I meant it more. One evening, Laura stayed late, helping me go over schedules and invoices. As we locked up, she hesitated. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Standing up to them?" I thought about it. About the loss of the family I thought I had. About the uncomfortable silences. About the fear of being judged. Then I thought about Theo's smile. "No," I said. "Not for a second." The lake reflected the restaurant lights as we walked out, steady and calm. I realized then that the hardest part wasn't reporting Megan or facing my parents. It was accepting that love without accountability isn't love at all. And that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do for your child is walk away from the people who refuse to protect them. A year passed faster than I expected, not because it was easy, but because it was full. Full in a way my life had never been before. Theo's 13th birthday arrived on a clear evening, the lake calm and glassy, reflecting the warm lights strung across the deck of the restaurant. Monroe's dockside grill buzzed with quiet joy, not loud or forced like the year before, but steady and real. The people who filled the tables were the ones who had stayed. Laura. The staff who treated Theo like family. A few close friends who never asked me to soften the truth or make excuses for anyone. Theo moved through the space with confidence I hadn't seen in him before. He wasn't loud. He wasn't showy. But he wasn't shrinking either. He helped a server carry plates, showed a younger kid how to fold napkins just right, laughed freely without glancing over his shoulder. The bruise was long gone. The fear was gone too. Laura leaned against the counter beside me, watching him with a soft smile. "You did good," she said. "We did," I corrected quietly. She nodded. "You know what I mean." I did. Life hadn't magically smoothed itself out. There were still court dates and paperwork. Still tense moments when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Still a hollow place where my parents used to be. Megan never apologized in person. Once, a letter arrived addressed to Theo. He opened it, read it silently, then tore it in half and dropped it in the trash without looking at me for permission. That was when I knew. He was truly healing. My parents called a few times in the early months, talking around the subject, asking when things would go back to normal. I told them the truth. Normal wasn't coming back. Not the way it had been. Silence followed after that. I grieved the parents I wished I had, the grandparents Theo deserved but didn't get. Grief didn't mean regret. One evening after closing, Theo and I sat by the lake, feet dangling off the dock. The water lapped gently below us, the kind of sound that settles your thoughts whether you want it to or not. "Mom," he said suddenly, skipping a stone across the surface. "Did I mess everything up?" The question hit me harder than any accusation ever could. I turned to him fully. "No," I said without hesitation. "You told the truth. That didn't mess anything up. It showed me what needed to change." He nodded slowly, processing that. "It still feels weird," he admitted. "Not having them around." "I know," I said. "It's okay to miss people even when they weren't good for you." He thought about that, then smiled faintly. "I like it better like this." So did I. The restaurant thrived, not because it expanded or made headlines, but because it became something honest. A place built on care instead of appearances. Laura stepped fully into a leadership role, mentoring Theo when he asked questions, teaching him patience and consistency instead of pressure. He learned how to listen to customers, how to apologize when something went wrong, how to stand his ground kindly. Watching him grow into himself healed something in me I didn't know was broken. I learned things too. I learned that family isn't proven by blood, but by who shows up when it's uncomfortable. I learned that protecting your child sometimes means disappointing people who raised you. I learned that silence can be just as harmful as cruelty, and that breaking it comes with a cost, but also with freedom. Most of all, I learned that strength doesn't always look like fighting. Sometimes it looks like walking away without looking back. On Theo's birthday, as the last guests drifted out and the lights dimmed, he stood beside me under the sign glowing softly above the entrance. "Thanks for choosing me," he said quietly. I wrapped an arm around his shoulders. There was never another choice. The lake reflected our silhouettes, steady and unbroken. For the first time in a long time, the future felt clear. Not perfect. Not painless. But real. And that was enough.